Welcome back to Hearts Beyond Rules, where love doesn't ask permission from age, fear, or society, only from the heart. She was older, and I wanted her more than I should. That was the first truth I never said out loud, the one that lived quietly between my ribs and grew louder every time she smiled at me like she already knew my secrets. I met her at a time when my life felt unfinished, like a sentence trailing off without punctuation. I was an adult, yes, but still learning how to stand steady in my own skin. She was past that phase. She carried herself with the calm confidence of someone who had already survived storms and learned which ones were worth walking into again. When she entered a room, she didn't demand attention. She simply owned the space by being present, by being real. At first, I told myself it was admiration, respect, curiosity, anything but desire. She was older, after all. That was the word everyone would use if they knew. Older as if it were a warning sign, as if it erased the way her laughter warmed the air, or the way her eyes held stories I wanted to read slowly, page by page. We talked like people who weren't supposed to linger, but did anyway. Long conversations that began casually and somehow slipped into honesty. She listened. Not the polite kind of listening, but the kind that makes you feel seen. When I spoke, she didn't rush to fill the silence. She let my words breathe. No one had ever done that for me before. I noticed the smallest things. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the soft sigh she let out when the day had been heavy, the strength in her hands that had worked, held, let go, and survived. Those hands told a story of experience, of love lived fully, of pain endured and healed. And that scared me, because wanting her wasn't simple. It wasn't innocent. It came with questions I didn't know how to answer. What would people say? What would she think if she knew how often I replayed our conversations in my head? How many times I imagined reaching for her hand, not to take something, but to offer myself honestly, without pretending I wasn't falling. She never crossed a line. Not once. And maybe that's why my feelings crossed every boundary inside me. She treated me with respect, with warmth, with a gentleness that didn't make me feel small. She spoke to me as an equal, never as someone younger or less. That made everything harder. Sometimes, when we laughed together, there was a pause afterward, a silence that felt charged, like the air before a storm. I wondered if she felt it too, or if it was just my heart trying to convince me of something impossible. I told myself to stop, to be reasonable, to remember that desire doesn't always mean destiny. But emotions don't listen to logic. They grow in the dark. Fed by glances held a second too long, by conversations that felt too intimate for just friends, by the way she said my name like it mattered. One evening, we sat side by side, not touching, yet closer than I'd ever been to anyone. She spoke about her past, not in bitterness, but in reflection. Love she had given, love she had lost, mistakes she had forgiven herself for, strength she didn't know she had until she needed it. I listened, quietly, realizing that I wasn't just attracted to her, I admired her deeply. In that moment, I understood the danger. Wanting her wasn't about thrill or rebellion. It was about connection. And connection changes you. It asks you to be brave. It asks you to risk judgment. It asks you to choose truth over comfort. I wondered if she saw me the way I saw her. Not as a number, not as a mistake, but as someone standing honestly in front of her, heart open, unguarded. Someone who didn't want to steal a moment, but build something real, even if the world didn't approve. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and smiled softly. Not flirtatious, not dismissive, just warm, safe. And somehow, that smile felt like both a beginning and a warning. I went home that night, restless. My thoughts tangled in her voice, her presence, the impossible what if. I knew wanting her would complicate everything. I knew loving her, if that's where this was going, would demand courage I wasn't sure I possessed. But I also knew this: some feelings don't ask whether they should exist. They simply do. And as I lay awake in the dark, heart heavy and hopeful, all at once, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. She was older, and I wanted her more than I should, not because it was forbidden, but because it felt real. And sometimes, real love is the most dangerous rule to break. If this story speaks to you, if you've ever felt a connection that didn't fit the rules, stay with us here at Hearts Beyond Rules. This is only the beginning. At Hearts Beyond Rules, we believe the most difficult loves are often the most honest ones. After that night, nothing around me looked the same. The streets I walked every day felt quieter, like they were holding their breath. My phone stayed too still in my hand, as if it knew I was waiting for her name to appear. I kept replaying her smile, the one that felt like an answer without words. Or maybe it was a question she was afraid to ask. I tried distance. I told myself space would cool what had begun to burn too brightly. But distance didn't erase her. It sharpened her presence. Every song seemed to echo her voice. Every thoughtful pause reminded me of the way she listened. I realized then that I wasn't craving her attention. I was craving the way she made me feel understood. When we met again, it wasn't planned. It never was with us. It was the kind of coincidence that feels designed by something braver than logic. She was standing there, calm as always, like she hadn't spent nights occupying my thoughts. But when our eyes met, something shifted. The air grew heavier, honest. She asked how I'd been. Such a simple question. Yet it landed deep, because she actually wanted the answer. We talked, carefully, as if we were both aware that one wrong step could crack something fragile. She spoke about her days, about how life kept moving forward, whether you were ready or not. I spoke about feeling stuck between who I was and who I wanted to become. She didn't interrupt. She never did. There was a moment, small, quiet, when our hands brushed, just for a second. But that second said everything we hadn't dared to. Neither of us pulled away immediately. We looked at each other, not smiling this time. Serious, vulnerable. I don't want to hurt you, she said softly. Almost like a confession. That sentence broke something open inside me, because it meant she had thought about it too. About me. About us. About the danger of feelings that didn't follow expected timelines. I'm not fragile, I replied, though my heart was pounding. And I wouldn't be here if this didn't matter. She exhaled slowly, like someone deciding whether to step forward or turn back. I could see the war in her eyes. Desire versus responsibility. Longing versus fear. She had lived enough to know how love could wound. I hadn't lived enough to know when to walk away. What I felt for her wasn't reckless. It was intentional. I didn't want secrecy or stolen moments. I wanted honesty, even if it came with consequences. I wanted to know her fears as much as her smiles. I wanted to be chosen, not hidden. She admitted the truth then, not dramatically, not impulsively, but with a quiet courage that shook me. You make me feel seen, she said. And that scares me. That was the moment. I understood that age didn't protect you from vulnerability. Experience didn't shield you from risk. If anything, it made the risk heavier, because you knew exactly what you could lose. We didn't kiss. Not yet. That restraint made everything more intense. Instead, we sat there, closer than ever, sharing a silence that felt sacred. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled, because it's already saying too much. People would judge us if they knew. I could already hear their voices calling it a phase, a mistake, a crisis. They wouldn't see the conversations that healed parts of us we hadn't known were broken. They wouldn't understand the balance we were trying to hold between desire and respect. When she finally stood to leave, she hesitated. Then she touched my arm gently, just enough to leave warmth behind. Some rules exist for a reason, she said, and some hearts don't recognize them, I replied. She smiled, sadly this time, and then she walked away. That night I didn't sleep. I wasn't restless. I was awake in a new way. Aware. I knew this wasn't a passing attraction. This was a choice forming slowly, painfully, one that would demand honesty from both of us. Days passed. Messages replaced meetings. Thoughtful words sent late at night. Check-ins that felt like lifelines. We were careful with what we said, but the truth was there between the lines. We were orbiting something inevitable. One evening, she finally asked the question we'd both been avoiding. What happens if we cross that line? I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. Because once you answer that, there's no pretending anymore. Then we do it with honesty, I wrote, with respect, and with courage. Her reply came minutes later, but it felt like hours. I don't know if I'm brave enough, she said. I wanted to tell her I would protect her, But love isn't about promises you can't guarantee. So instead, I told her the truth. I don't want to rush you. I just don't want to lie about how I feel. That was enough. Because sometimes, love doesn't begin with a kiss. Sometimes it begins with permission to feel, to hope, to risk. And as our connection deepened, I knew one thing for certain. Wanting her wasn't the mistake. The mistake would be pretending this wasn't real. And here, at Hearts Beyond Rules, you already know what comes next. Because when two hearts recognize each other, rules start to feel like suggestions. At Hearts Beyond Rules, this is where love stops whispering and starts asking for courage. After that conversation, everything slowed down and intensified at the same time. We didn't rush toward each other, but we didn't retreat either. It felt like standing on the edge of something deep, knowing that stepping back would be safer, but stepping forward would be truer. When we finally met again, it was intentional this time. No coincidence, no excuses, just two people choosing to be honest enough to face what was growing between them. She arrived before me. I knew because when I walked in, I felt it immediately, that quiet pull, that awareness that someone important was near. She looked up, and for a moment, neither of us smiled. We just held eye contact, like we were checking in with each other's courage. "You came," she said. "So did you," I replied. We sat across from each other, not side by side this time. It felt symbolic, like we needed to see each other clearly before deciding anything. She spoke first, her voice calm but carrying weight. "I've spent years building walls," she said. "Not because I don't believe in love, but because I know what it can cost." I nodded. I didn't interrupt. I was learning that loving her meant letting her speak her truth fully. "I'm not afraid of what people would say," she continued. "I'm afraid of hurting you, of being something you outgrow." That hit me harder than judgment ever could, because it meant she cared enough to worry about my future, even if it meant pushing herself out of it. "I'm not looking for something temporary," I said quietly, "and I'm not chasing a fantasy. I know exactly what I'm choosing." She studied my face, like she was searching for doubt. She didn't find it. "You shouldn't have to prove anything," she said. "I'm not proving," I answered. "I'm standing." That's when she reached across the table and took my hand. Fully this time, no hesitation, no accidental brush, just warmth, steady and real. My heart didn't race. It settled, like it had been waiting for that touch to finally come home. People around us talked and laughed, unaware that something fragile and powerful was unfolding in plain sight. I wondered how many stories like ours existed, quietly, hidden behind polite smiles and careful distance. Her thumb traced a slow circle on my hand, and I saw it then, the shift. The moment when restraint turns into decision. "We can't do this halfway," she said. "If we do this, it has to be honest. No hiding, no pretending we don't feel it." "I don't want half of you," I said. "I want what's real, even if it's difficult." She smiled then. Not the soft, cautious smile from before, but something warmer, braver. That was the first time I realized she wasn't just older than me. She was choosing vulnerability again. We didn't define anything that day. We didn't label it or promise forever. But something changed between us. The air felt clearer. The fear didn't disappear, but it no longer controlled the room. The world, however, didn't soften with us. The first looks came quietly, lingering glances. Subtle pauses in conversation when we were together. People noticing what they weren't supposed to. It didn't take long before curiosity turned into assumption. I felt protective in a way I hadn't expected. Not possessive, but aware that loving her meant standing steady when whispers tried to shake us. She noticed it too. One day, she said softly as we walked together, "They'll stop seeing us and start seeing the gap." I stopped walking, turned to face her. "Let them," I said. "I see you." That mattered more than I could explain. There were nights when doubt crept in, when she pulled back slightly, not because she wanted to, but because history whispered warnings. And there were moments when I questioned myself too, wondering if love alone was enough to bridge time, experience, expectation. But every time we talked, really talked, the doubt lost ground. She challenged me, made me think deeper, grow faster, love more intentionally. And I reminded her that desire doesn't fade with years, that being wanted isn't something you age out of. One night, sitting close enough to feel each other's breath, she finally said it. This isn't a mistake, she said. It's just unconventional. I smiled. Because here at Hearts Beyond Rules, we know unconventional doesn't mean wrong. When we kissed for the first time, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was slow, deliberate, and full of understanding. Like two people acknowledging that something precious had crossed a line and choosing not to pull away. There was no fireworks, no chaos, just certainty. But certainty comes with consequences. The next morning, reality returned. Responsibilities, eyes, opinions. She grew quiet, thoughtful. I could tell she was weighing the cost again. I don't regret this, she said. I just need to know we're strong enough. I took her hand again, grounding us both. We don't have to be fearless, I said. We just have to be honest. She leaned into me then, resting her head against my shoulder. And in that simple gesture, I felt the weight of her trust. Loving her wasn't about rebellion. It was about respect, about choosing connection over comfort, truth over silence. And as the world slowly began to notice what we were becoming, I understood something clearly for the first time. This wasn't the end of the struggle. It was the beginning of being seen. And sometimes, the bravest love story isn't the one that shocks the world. It's the one that survives it. This journey continues right here at Hearts Beyond Rules. At Hearts Beyond Rules, this is where love is tested, not by passion, but by the world. Being seen changed everything. What once lived quietly between us now existed in the open, exposed to opinions that didn't ask for context or care about truth. The whispers grew louder. The looks lingered longer. Some were curious, some judgmental, some almost pitying. None of them knew us, yet all of them felt entitled to define us. She felt it more than I did. I noticed it in the way her shoulders tightened when we walked into a room together. In the pauses before she reached for my hand. In the careful way she chose her words when others were around. Loving me hadn't made her weaker, but it had made her visible. And visibility comes with weight. One evening, she finally said what I knew had been pressing against her heart. I've spent years learning how to stand on my own, she said quietly. I don't want to lose myself trying to defend us. I understood her fear. Love shouldn't feel like a constant explanation. It shouldn't demand armor every time you step outside. And yet here we were, choosing something real in a world that preferred simple stories. I don't want you to fight for us alone, I told her. And I don't want to be something you have to protect yourself from. She looked at me then, eyes searching, tired but honest. I don't regret loving you, she said. I just didn't expect it to ask this much of me. That was the truth neither of us could avoid anymore. Love wasn't the problem. The cost was. There were moments when she pulled away, not emotionally, but practically. Fewer public meetings, more private conversations. She needed space to breathe, to remember who she was outside of us. I gave it to her, even when it hurt, because love that suffocates is just another kind of fear. During that distance, I learned something important. Wanting her wasn't enough. Understanding her was. She had lived a life before me. Full, complicated, meaningful. I wasn't there to replace anything. I wasn't there to fix her past or rewrite her future. I was there to walk beside her if she chose me, and I had to be strong enough to accept it if she didn't. When we came back together, really together, it was after one of the hardest conversations we'd ever had. No romance, no soft edges, just truth laid bare. This can't be about proving anything, she said. Not to them, not even to us. I know, I replied. It has to be about peace. She nodded slowly. And peace, she said, means knowing that if one day this becomes too heavy, we let go with respect, not resentment. That scared me more than judgment ever had. But it also made me love her more, because she wasn't promising forever just to keep me close. She was promising honesty, even if it cost her the comfort of certainty. Over time, something shifted again. The noise faded, not because people stopped talking, but because we stopped listening. We learned how to exist without constantly bracing ourselves, how to find normal in the unconventional, how to laugh again without checking who was watching. I watched her reclaim herself, stand taller, smile more freely, and she watched me grow into a steadiness I didn't know I had. Loving her didn't make me smaller. It made me intentional. One day, someone finally said it out loud. The question everyone had been thinking. Don't you worry about the future, they asked her. About the difference? She didn't look at me for reassurance. She answered on her own. I worry more about a life without honesty, she said. Age doesn't scare me. Regret does. That was the moment I realized something profound. This wasn't my story about wanting an older woman. This was our story about choosing each other again and again in a world that told us not to. We didn't win everyone over. Some people never softened. Some walked away. But what remained was real. Tested. Earned. Love didn't erase the gap between us. It taught us how to stand across it. Hands still linked. And maybe one day, our paths will change. Maybe life will pull us in different directions. Love doesn't promise permanence. It promises presence. But right now, we are here, honest, connected, unashamed. She was older. I wanted her more than I should. And loving her taught me that should is a small word for something that can change your entire life. This is Hearts Beyond Rules, where love doesn't fit expectations, but it fits the heart.